The night before the wedding, Lagos was too quiet. The kind of stillness that didn't bring rest. Only a strange pressure that settled like mist in the air. No traffic, no generators humming, no last-minute chaos in the bridal suite, just a slow, eerie calm that made everything feel rehearsed, as though the city itself was holding its breath. High above Victoria Island, in a luxury suite at Echo Signature, Cynthia sat alone at the edge of the bed. The lights were dim, the air chilled, and her engagement ring glinted faintly as she turned it around her finger. Again and again, her wedding dress, a fitted mermaid gown studded with pearls and imported crystals, hung by the window like a symbol. Everything was ready. Everything was flawless. The vendors had been paid in full. The guest list had crossed 600. Her bridal robe had her name embroidered in gold. The wedding hashtag was already trending. Hashtag the Okaforce 22 for .com. But something was off. There had been no call from Michael that day. Not a text. Not a quick I love you voice note. He had obeyed the tradition to the letter. The groom must not see the bride before the ceremony. Yet silence, in its own way, speaks louder than presence. The silence gnawed at her. Around 11:30 p.m., she remembered her lip gloss. A small, nude Fenty Beauty gloss that had been left earlier in the adjoining suite during makeup rehearsals. That suite belonged to Michael and his best man, Ryan. It was just next door, close enough to slip in and out unnoticed. She wrapped her robe around her, slid into her slippers, and stepped into the hallway. It was quiet there too, dimly lit and empty, as though the hotel itself had paused to listen. She approached the door. Voices seeped through the wood. Male voices. Urgent, low, almost whispered, but not low enough. She paused. At first, she thought it was nothing. Just a conversation between friends. But then she heard her name. And something else. Something that made her blood still in her veins. Michael's voice. Ryan's too. The exchange wasn't calm. It was tense. Are you mad? Ryan snapped. Tomorrow is her wedding day and you're still talking about this child matter. Michael's voice followed. Quieter but firm. I didn't want this. I've been paying Tasha off for 3 years. I begged her to keep quiet, but now she says she's coming to the wedding. She says Cynthia deserves to know. Ryan muttered a curse. You should have told her from the beginning. I didn't even know he was mine until last year, Michael replied. I did the DNA test secretly. He's mine, Ryan. He's for. There was a pause. A suffocating pause. She thinks Tasha was just some fling during NYSC. She has no idea there's a child. I wanted to protect her, but there was no protection in secrecy. Cynthia's hand trembled. Her lip gloss slipped from her fingers, landing silently on the thick carpet beneath her feet. The words echoed in her ears. He's for. She doesn't know. I've been paying her off. She backed away from the door and walked down the hall with legs that no longer felt like her own. Her suite was cold when she re-entered it. Her hands fumbled with the lock. Her knees gave way before she reached the bed. She collapsed to the floor, heart racing, breath shallow. Everything was still perfect on the outside. Her veil sat folded on the dresser. Her bouquet had been delivered, ivory roses tied with silk ribbon. The playlist for the bridal prep was cued on the speaker. Nothing had changed, and yet, everything had changed. Michael had a child, a 4-year-old child with another woman, and not once in all their years together, not during their courtship, not during introductions, not even during their premarital counseling, had he mentioned it. She sat in silence, the quiet ringing in her ears. She didn't cry, not yet. The tears hadn't formed, only the heaviness, only the betrayal. At 3 a.m., her phone lit up. Michael. She let it ring out. A message came in moments later. Babe, I know we're not supposed to talk, but I miss you. Just wanted to say I love you. Tomorrow's our day. There was no response from her, only silence, and a long, slow look into the mirror across the room. The woman staring back at her looked like a stranger. Eyes dull, lips pale, no smile, just a realization echoing in her mind. He has a son, a whole child, and he never told me. The dress still hung by the window, bathed in soft hotel light, but the fairy tale was over before it began, and in its place was something far more real. The wedding was in a few hours, but she was already walking down an aisle of truth. Alone, morning arrived not with light, but with weight. A dense, invisible pressure settled across the bridal suite, tightening its grip as the hour drew near. Cynthia sat before the mirror, still and blank, as a flurry of laughter and voices filled the room behind her. Kamsi moved around her like a professional, blending, contouring, setting, unaware that she was working on the face of a woman at war with herself. Bridesmaids posed for selfies. Laughter echoed. Afrobeats played softly in the background, but Cynthia heard none of it, Beneath the foundation, her expression remained unreadable. Inside, the reality clawed at her lungs. The man she was about to marry had a son, 4 years old, and not once had he offered her the truth. The mirror did its job, it reflected beauty, but it could not reflect the fracture beneath. She looked stunning, otherworldly, even. Her dress fit like magic, the veil crowned her with poise. Her smile, when it came, was delicate and believable, but it wasn't hers. By 11:47 a.m., the bridal convoy arrived at the church in Lekki Phase 1. Cameras flashed before the car door had even opened. Videographers followed every step as Cynthia emerged from the Rolls-Royce, her gown sweeping the ground like royalty returning from battle. Inside, the church was drenched in light. White roses lined the aisle. A choir hummed beneath the domed ceiling. Guests turned as one, eyes wide with admiration. Phones tilted upward, ready to capture the moment. At the altar stood Michael, handsome, composed, smiling, the man who had traded truth for performance. Beside him stood Ryan, his best man, but his eyes refused to stay still. They darted from guest to guest, unable to rest. As Cynthia walked in, arm linked with her father's, the room seemed to pause. There was reverence in the air, but she felt none of it. Her eyes remained fixed on Michael, searching, questioning, reading the face of the man who had stolen her right to choose. His smile was wide, too wide. It revealed nothing but charm. No crack, no flicker of guilt, only a flawless performance for the crowd. When she reached him, her hand met his. The priest began, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to witness the union of Michael and Cynthia in holy matrimony." The ceremony unfolded like theater. Every word memorized, every ritual in place. When Michael recited his vows, his voice rang clear, confident, almost proud. "I, Michael, take you, Cynthia, to be my lawfully wedded wife." He smiled as he said it. The crowd beamed, but when the priest turned to Cynthia, the silence deepened. "Do you, Cynthia, take this man?" There was a pause, brief, but undeniable. A hesitation, not long enough to alarm the crowd, but enough for Michael to notice, enough for Ryan to flinch, enough for Cynthia to feel her pulse spike. Still, she nodded. "I do." The words tasted like ash. Not because she believed them, but because she needed time. She needed the world to stop watching long enough for her to choose her next move and not be cornered into one. The kiss came next. Cameras clicked. Applause followed. But Cynthia's lips felt numb, her skin cold, the ring on her finger heavier than it should have been. By the time they reached the reception, the lie had been fully stitched into reality. The hall in Victoria Island was exquisite, ivory drapery, gold cutlery, a chandelier imported from Spain. Guests sipped wine. Speeches flowed. The cake stood tall like a castle. Cynthia sat beside Michael, smiling for photos, lifting a glass she never sipped. She nodded at tributes she didn't hear and leaned into toasts she couldn't feel, until her eyes locked on something across the hall. A woman, tall, slim, brown-skinned, standing quietly near the back. She wore a fitted blue dress and held a child, a small boy in a white shirt, barely old enough to understand the event around him. But Cynthia understood. The boy had Michael's chin, his dimples, his eyes. He was a mirror. The room spun gently as Cynthia stared. The music blurred. The crowd dimmed. Her fingers slipped from the stem of her glass. The sound of breaking glass beneath the table jolted those nearby. But she didn't notice. She stood, walked, left the noise behind. In the hallway, her breath grew shallow. The cold Lagos air hit her lungs like water. Then came the footsteps. Michael. He followed. He called her name. But Cynthia turned, eyes blazing. Why is she here? Michael's mouth opened, but the excuses were weak before they were formed. She came on her own. I didn't invite her. With your son? Her voice cut sharp. To our wedding? He fumbled. She threatened to come. I told her not to. I didn't think she would. But none of it mattered anymore. Because truth had found its way in, not through confession, but through presence. Cynthia stepped back from him, as if contact might contaminate her. This wasn't a marriage, she said. This was a stage, and I was the main act. She didn't wait for a reply. There was nothing more to say. She returned to the car, where the driver stood, confused. Madam, are you okay? She didn't answer, just entered the car. And for the first time since the night before, her breathing slowed. The storm inside had not passed, but it had changed. Now, there was clarity, and that was enough. The mansion on Banana Island was quiet, not from peace, but from a deep, penetrating silence, the kind that settles after something has broken. 3 days had passed since the wedding, and Cynthia hadn't spoken a full sentence to her husband. She stayed upstairs, in the master bedroom, where the walls were too white and the marble too cold to feel like home. Her tea remained untouched. Her gown, still in its dry-cleaning bag, hung at the back of the closet like a cruel reminder. Downstairs, Michael paced. Upstairs, Cynthia existed like a shadow, silent, present, observing a life that was no longer hers. The house wasn't a honeymoon suite. It was a crime scene. She hadn't returned to her parents. She hadn't posted on social media. She hadn't told the press anything. But she hadn't needed to. In Lagos, whispers travel faster than facts. By the fourth day, someone knocked on the door. It was Kioma, her oldest friend, her maid of honor, the woman who knew her silence almost better than she did. Kioma didn't enter with flowers or soft apologies. She came with suya, bottled water, and guilt dripping from her eyes. "Please let me speak before you throw me out," she said. Cynthia didn't move. She stood by the hallway wall, arms folded. Kioma took a breath and spoke with a voice that trembled beneath the weight of truth. "I knew, not fully, not with certainty, but enough. At the bridal shower, Fola, Michael's groomsman, had whispered something to Ifeoma, one of the bridesmaids. A name, a woman, a child. Kioma had overheard. She hadn't told Cynthia. None of them had. They assumed she knew, or they were afraid to be the ones to ruin what looked perfect. I thought, maybe you had forgiven him in private," Kioma admitted. "So you let me walk into a marriage blind?" Cynthia asked, her voice a whisper of something more dangerous than rage. Kioma looked down, unable to hold her gaze. "We didn't mean to betray you, but you did." Later that evening, another visitor arrived, uninvited. Michael's older sister, Angela. She came dressed in calm, flowing silk, red lipstick, the pose of a woman used to smoothing scandals. She offered tea, offered prayers, offered perspective. "Cynthia, every marriage comes with secrets. What matters is how you choose to carry them." But Cynthia didn't blink. "You knew too?" Angela hesitated. That was her answer. "You're his wife now," she added. "You can help him grow. You can protect this family from shame." "That's the problem," Cynthia replied. "Everyone is protecting the lie. No one protected me." Angela left soon after, her perfume lingering longer than her words. By the time the house returned to silence, Cynthia understood something vital. This wasn't just Michael's betrayal. It was collective. His family, her friends, the bridal party, even the planner who must have seen the woman in blue. They'd all been actors, all kept the script alive, all kept the wedding rolling. And she had been the show. She had smiled for the cameras. She had stood on the altar. She had kissed the man who was never honest. That night, Michael stood outside the bedroom door. He didn't knock. He just spoke softly through it, as though speaking to a ghost. "Cynthia, please. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted a fresh start, a clean slate. I was afraid you'd leave me if you knew." He paused, waited, then added, "Talk to me, please." Cynthia didn't open the door, but she answered, "I'll talk, just not here." The meaning settled in the air like smoke. She had no intention of continuing inside a lie. Morning in Lagos arrived gray and slow. The clouds above Banana Island drifted heavy, like the city itself was holding its breath. Cynthia stood in her walk-in closet, not dressed for occasion but for purpose, a plain white tee, high-waisted jeans, minimal makeup, hair pulled back, no earrings, no perfume, no ring. She didn't call anyone, didn't tell Kioma, not even her mother. She simply stepped out of the mansion, slid into the back seat of the car, and gave the driver a name. Festac. The man looked at her in the mirror, hesitated, then nodded. The drive stretched into silence, from Ikoyi's manicured boulevards to the heart of Festac town. Lagos unraveled like two different worlds, stitched together by potholes and honking danfas. Cynthia's hands stayed clasped in her lap, eyes unmoving. She wasn't anxious. She wasn't afraid. She was something rarer, focused. At the edge of 23rd Street, the driver stopped in front of a faded green bungalow. No security gate, no flashy car in the driveway. Just a quiet house with curtains swaying behind dusty louver windows. She stepped out, walked to the gate, knocked twice. No rehearsals, no plan, just instinct. The door opened. The woman stood in the frame, same one from the wedding reception. Same piercing calm in her eyes. No shock, no apology, no fear. Just an acknowledgement, silent, sharp. She stepped aside. Cynthia entered. The house smelled of baby lotion and fried plantain. The living room was clean, unpretentious, and warm. Toys were scattered. A half-eaten biscuit lay on a plastic table. And on the couch, sitting cross-legged, watching cartoons with wide eyes, was the boy. The child. Michael's son. No name had been exchanged yet, but none was needed. Cynthia saw it instantly. The resemblance. Same chin. Same nose. Same stubborn brow. He couldn't have been more than 4. Yet every line on his face screamed bloodline. And it wasn't her own. The woman, young, mid-20s, modest, moved into the kitchen briefly and returned with 2 glasses of water. She placed one before Cynthia and sat opposite her. Still, no one spoke. The only sound was the television, and the quiet thump of Cynthia's pulse in her ears. Then finally, gently, the woman broke the silence. His name is Malachi. Cynthia nodded. How old? 4, DNA confirmed. I didn't want to crash your wedding. I truly didn't. But when Michael stopped sending support for months, and started pretending like Malachi didn't exist, I snapped. There was no hysteria in her tone. No drama. Only fact. He begged me to stay away, she added. Said you didn't need to know. Said you'd never stay if you found out. Cynthia's voice came low, cracked at the edges. Did you love him? The woman didn't flinch. I loved what I thought he would be. I thought he'd grow up. Instead, he gave me hush money and vanished. A pause. Then she continued. I didn't come to wreck your wedding. I came to remind him that Malachi isn't a secret. Cynthia's gaze drifted to the child again. He looked up, blinked, smiled, and something inside her, something she didn't expect, softened. Because the child wasn't a weapon. He wasn't a scheme. He was innocent. He was breathing proof of a betrayal. Yes, but he was also a living, blinking, giggling little boy. Cynthia stood. I'm not staying married to him, she said. The woman's eyes widened for the first time. Why not? You're not the one with the child. No, Cynthia replied, but I'm the one who wasn't given a choice. They both stood now, 2 women separated by a man who had gambled with truth. The difference was, one had already left. The other was now walking out the door. Back in the car, Cynthia didn't speak. She didn't cry either. She simply stared out the window, eyes Festac blurred into Surler, then into Victoria Island, and finally back into Banana Island. Michael was in the living room when she returned, his phone in hand, eyes tired, voice ready. You went to see her, he said. Cynthia said nothing. She walked upstairs, then paused on the stairs, halfway up, turned back, met his gaze fully for the first time since the altar. I met your son. Michael looked as though a wall had collapsed inside him, but Cynthia didn't give him space to explain. You lied for years, she said, and then married me like it didn't matter. She climbed the rest of the stairs. At the top, she added, without turning, tomorrow morning, I'm calling my lawyer. The sun rose slow and golden over the Lagos skyline, spilling light across the marble floor of the Banana Island mansion like it had no idea what was about to unfold. Cynthia was already awake. She hadn't slept much, maybe a handful of minutes between memories. Her mind wasn't chaotic anymore. It was clean, cold, focused. She sat at the vanity, hair brushed back, face bare, wedding ring gone. The mug beside her read Mrs. She turned it to face the wall. At exactly 9 a.m., she stepped out of the mansion in flat shoes and a navy blue blouse. Her bag contained only 2 things, her ID and the signed copy of her father's legal contact. The driver met her by the gate and didn't ask questions. By now, even the silence in the compound had adjusted to her distance. They drove straight to Ikoyi. The building was tall, glass-walled, business-like, the kind of place where decisions are made that ripple through newspapers. Inside the legal firm, she was met by barrister Amara Okonkwo, a woman who had represented her family for nearly a decade. Sharp, soft-spoken, surgical in language. Cynthia didn't bother with small talk. She sat, pulled the chair in closer, and said, I want an annulment. Not a divorce, an annulment. Barrister Amara blinked once, understanding more than the words said. Understood. We'll build the case around fraudulent concealment. Cynthia nodded. No tears, no shaking voice. Just a signature on documents that would burn an entire facade to the ground. The filing went through in less than 72 hours. And Lagos did what Lagos does. It exploded. First came the blog headlines. Hashtag the Okaforce 22 for bride files annulment days after wedding. Secrets at the altar. What Cynthia might have overheard. Then came the social media posts. She left a whole Banana Island mansion. Wow. Why marry if you know you have a child? Men will embarrass you. The wedding hashtag that once trended with joy, now trended with pity, and applause in equal measure. But Cynthia didn't flinch. She didn't hide. She didn't post in defense or in shame. 3 days after the news broke, she posted something else. A video. Not dramatic, not pitiful. Just her, barefaced, seated beside her window, sunlight in her hair. Her voice clear, controlled. Some people marry for love. Others marry for image. I married thinking I had both, but I found out on the night before my wedding that my husband had a child. a whole sun, and never said a word. I'm not bitter. I'm just awake. If you are a woman being managed instead of loved, this is your sign. Run. Not for drama. Run for your peace. She didn't expect the reaction, but it came. Thousands of shares. Hundreds of thousands of views. Comments from women across Lagos and beyond, wives, exes, girlfriends, strangers. Even influencers reposted it. Brands slid into her DMs, but Cynthia ignored all of it. This wasn't for clout. It was for closure. The only message she replied to was from a woman who wrote, "You gave me the courage to leave a man who hid a second family in worry. God bless you." Cynthia didn't need to be a savior. She just didn't want to be silent. 1 week later, the final annulment document was delivered to her new apartment in Lekki Phase 1, smaller, quieter, but entirely hers. The courier handed her the envelope. She opened it alone, read it twice, then laughed. Not loud, not bitter, just soft and full, like someone finally breathing from the bottom of her lungs. That evening, she invited a handful of real friends to her rooftop. No cameras, no filters, no influencers, just 8 people who had stayed close when everyone else had leaned into gossip. Kioma came with fried rice and guilt-shaped wine. Ifeoma brought plantain and an awkward apology. They drank under the sky, talked about everything except weddings, and toasted to freedom without ceremony. Cynthia raised her glass last, to not needing a man's last name to feel like a complete woman. And the rooftop roared with laughter, with clinking glasses, with women finally seeing each other without performance. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't pain. It was reclamation. The city woke late that morning. Lagos traffic crawled like honey, thick with heat and noise, but somewhere along the quieter spine of the mainland, in the heart of Festac town, a small green bungalow stood still. The gate creaked open at exactly 10 a.m. A silver car pulled into the dusty compound, and out stepped Cynthia. No driver, no entourage, no makeup, just her white cotton shirt, black flats, and a quiet look on her face that said she wasn't here to revisit pain. She was here to rewrite it. The woman who opened the door this time smiled fully. There was no fear in her eyes, no tension in her voice, just something tired and gentle. "You came back." Cynthia stepped inside. The house looked the same clean floor, same low hum of cartoons in the background, but the weight in the air had shifted. Lighter now, real. Malachi was on the rug, drawing with crayons. He looked up when Cynthia entered, and this time, his smile was brighter. He ran to her. No hesitation. She crouched and held him, his small arms wrapped around her neck like they'd done this 1,000 times. It was the first hug she'd received in weeks that didn't come with conditions. She pulled back, looked into his face, and whispered, "I'm sorry, not because of what he did, because of what the adults around him hadn't done." They sat in the parlor, Cynthia, the boy, and the mother whose name was now known across social media but still lived quietly, out of sight. Her name was Nina. No stage lights here, no performance, just 2 women and the one truth between them. Cynthia didn't waste time. She opened her bag and pulled out a brown envelope. Inside were 3 documents, stamped, signed. "It's time to file for full paternity recognition. Legal, permanent. Malachi deserves his rights." Nina blinked, slowly. "You're doing this?" "Yes," Cynthia said. "Not for him. For the boy." Nina's voice softened. "I thought you'd never want to see us again. That's what your child is growing up with, the idea that he's something to hide. I won't be another adult that fails him." They went together the next week to the family court in Ikeja. The papers were filed. The DNA report, already confirmed, was attached. The judge signed a notice of hearing. The date was fixed. Cynthia didn't sit in the courtroom when it began. She stood, straight-backed, calm, resolute. Michael arrived late, wearing a suit and chain, escorted by his sister and an apologetic glance. But it didn't matter. The hearing was swift, uncontested, the evidence airtight. By the end of the session, a new document existed in Nigeria's legal system. Malachi Nathaniel Okafor, son of Michael Okafor, rightful heir, and now no longer erased from paper or history. Outside the courtroom, Michael tried to speak. She didn't wait to hear it. The apology would be too late. Weeks passed. Lagos moved on to other gossip, another celebrity wedding, another cheating scandal. But Cynthia didn't return to the spotlight. She returned to herself. She launched a project, quietly, without press, a foundation that provided legal support for single mothers with children denied paternity or support. No press release, no awards, just action. The first woman they helped was 29, the next, 21, then another. Each case handled quietly, with results. No one even knew Cynthia was behind it. except Nina and Malachi. One evening, Cynthia visited Festac again. She brought a Spider-Man backpack and new crayons. Malachi ran into her arms. He whispered something this time. "Will you still come back again?" She smiled. "Always." That night, Cynthia returned home to Lekki. She poured a glass of zobo, stepped out onto her balcony, and watched the city from above. The lights sparkled like broken glass scattered over land. She didn't cry. She didn't wish. She simply breathed. The kind of breath that comes when you've walked through a fire and come out holding your name, your voice, and your future. In her phone gallery, beneath bridal portraits and wedding videos she no longer looked at, sat one photo. Malachi's drawing. A stick figure in a white dress holding hands with a boy and a smaller stick figure. He had written one word beneath it, in shaky, innocent handwriting. Family. Cynthia stared at it and smiled. Not everything broken has to be lost. Some things are reborn.